button to say. But we are at noon o'clock and I will call this meeting of the Missouri Valley Complex Committee to order. Steve, would you call the roll?
Johnson Perillo. Here. Wayne Martinez. Here. Misty Hills and Day
Here.
here. Dale Tyler. Here. Maria. Scott Olson. Kevin Football. Here. Tom Peters. Here. Alan Heim. Here. Pierre LaCour.
Here.
Your forum.
All right, second item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from May 14th. All of those should have been, or those should have been handed up to you and also emailed previously. Is there any additions or corrections we need to note for those minutes?
Meeting minutes? Yes.
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 14th, 2024 as submitted?
I would move to approve the May 14th.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second it.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes for May 14th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes for May 14th approved. Item number 3 is an update from Commissioner Munson and some briefing material from the county and budget and all sorts of things.
Chair, if I could, I'd like to move 3 and 4, swap them out. I'd like to have Swenson and Hagan come up and kind of go through their presentation a little bit, because some of their expenses we're gonna want in their budget. So I figured if we go there first, then we'll come up and follow up.
Yeah, hearing no objections from the committee, I would say we can swap item 4 and welcome representatives from Swenson and Hagan to the lectern. Then I'll have you introduce yourself to for the record.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Jason Patrician with Swenson Hagan. And we have been working with Commissioner Munson on the steps that it would take to plat and to produce a new fairgrounds facility. And so we, in our last meeting, had laid out what type of things all the players were looking for. We started talking about spatialness, so we could start getting a concept of what those areas would need and what type of facilities they would require. So currently, the fairground is a piece of property that resides in Burleigh County, but it's underneath the ETA's jurisdiction with Bismuth. And so having that ETA jurisdiction puts a little different layer of coordination and, of course, policy and ordinance within the development of the particular property. And so last meeting that we had, we walked through what those steps most likely are going to look at. Things like zoning, platting, stormwater, drainage, and then, of course, the uses. So how does this campus start coming together? How do we get this to be a campus, and what type of things that maybe the city might be looking at from their ordinance standpoint and their policy standpoint, from having right-of-ways or public streets compared to, like, if we're going to have rural roads with a rural feel in more of a campus type setting. And so those things then require us to have a couple additional steps within the planning process to get everybody to sign off on how that campus is going to look like. With that, we're putting together, and we should have that finished today, a proposal for you that would outlay the steps that it would take to get to that end point. So for instance, we would have platting and zoning. We're going to have the actual running through stormwater and getting that stuff set up. And then, of course, once we get past all of the nuts and bolts part of this, we would have actually the part that would be like what we're going to do on the ground. So the city requires, of course, a site plan submittal. So if the city requires that submittal to be ran through, which I anticipate that would be, we would have some costs in there to do these, if you want to call it, different phases. So phase one would be working with all the party groups here within the first couple of months to set up a working session or a group of working sections to get out what's going to be important for every group and what they're trying to get out of the use of the property. And then once we get through that phase, we would be able to go into phase two, which would be development of the plat, stormwater, and all those nuts and bolts pieces with the city, county, and all the players. So that would get us then to a point where we could have the property zoned, we could have it platted, we have stormwater figured out, and then we'd be able to go to phase three, which could be the actual infrastructure development and site development. And so that's where things get a little bit unique. The city would want to obviously see any of the things that we'll be looking into: sanitary sewers, stormwater infrastructure, and of course, water needs. On top of that, once you get it past that plan review and that setup, then there's going to be some things like if you want to be bringing in like an RV park, right? Was that park set up ahead of time in a site plan with the city review so that that can be incorporated into the construction sequence while you've got your contractors and you've got your economy of scale to bring some of your unit prices down. So that's how that meeting kind of went. That's kind of how we set that up. We've set up in a letter that you'll get scheduled sequence of how these steps would take time and when we could have start dates and end dates, and taking into effect, once we get to infrastructure, what times we want to be bidding certain things, because there are certain times that we get good bids and there's going to be times we're not going to get good bids. So we want to take advantage of that and try to extend those dollars as far as we can as well. So I would be willing to take any questions, clarify anything.
So is it safe to say that this is summarizing as I see it? You've been working closely with Commissioner Munson specifically as the portfolio holder. So the meetings that you're referencing is between your team and the commissioner on.
Correct.
And the primary responsibility of us sitting around the table here is to set up meetings with you so you understand what each of the stakeholders needs, wants, desires.
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Yep. So that phase one part of that would be to try to get that vision, to get that dream out of everybody so that we have an ability to try to thoughtfully put together how that next step, that planning, that sequencing, all of that can get put together. And then we have these random pieces and we put it together into a global plan. And so that's getting together with work groups and saying, hey, you guys know what you need. You guys know how you guys want it to look and stuff like that. How can we work with you to get that on paper? And then so at the end of that phase one, we could have a concept that would be there that would say, okay, there's the thoughtfulness about the individual entities and what they're trying to get out of their need. And then here's how the global thing can come together with the property and how we get access through here and how we serve everybody with utilities and all of those things and try to make it more of a complete plan instead of components, right?
So you keep referring to us entities. Is there, and I came late, so I apologize. I was at a different 4-H meeting, you guys. Oh, past middle school. So, what about other entities that don't sit at this table? Is there an idea to have a community input where someone who loves to run their dog off the leash every Sunday out there could come and say, hey, could you put in a dog park? I mean, is that a plan?
And I think anything and everything is open.
Okay.
It's the input that we receive in what the uses can be or want to be and how we can help you to get that. So for instance, if there's entities that don't sit at this table, we can have some public input, times and things like that. We can give presentations.
So were you given access to all the other public input meetings in past years? Because I'm not sure that Swenson and Hagen, I could quick look to see if you did it.
No.
Where we had the people who were like, had this vision for a pavilion to have a farmer's market. They don't sit here right now. I mean, were you given access or you?
We haven't got
will
that
have
far
access?
yet.
Okay,
Yeah, so we're just finishing up kind of the sequencing of how the scheduling could come together in the various pieces and then the phasing of those as far as the proposal goes. And then I'll be presenting that to Commissioner Munson and then we can get into that as we get into those
Wait,
groups.
who pays the bill to Swenson and Hagan? Is that coming out of the Missouri Valley Complex or out of my Burley County
Burley County,
Parks budget?
yes. The Missouri Valley complex budget is what would
Is
be
paying
paying,
them.
yes.
Okay, so has everybody at this table been given a copy of like the old master plan? Are people aware that this has been done multiple times? And we've paid multiple times, so why, at this table, we've never even looked at the one from 2019 or 17 and said, wow, this is a great plan, it's a done deal, let's work on this vision. I mean, why are we coming in again with another group when we haven't even looked at, maybe we have a great plan? Maybe.
Very good point.
It's like, oh, it's crap, but maybe everybody at this table could agree and go, wow, this was a great plan, all that money we spent. We just never got to the dream, like the dream's done, we don't need this. I mean, we do, because we're gonna need help getting it cited and all that. But I mean, that to me would be the
Yeah, I
more
think-
logical step than meeting with another person. Let's look at what's already out there.
Yeah,
There are years of data.
You know, from my seat, I would say that, yeah, it would be very beneficial to see the previous plans. I would also put forward that we're in a slightly different position than we have in the last several years because we had not had this kind of a complex committee. Additionally, the public input, I think, is definitely important too. We're talking about a public area out there. I would also remind, you know, even for the minutes here, that Dustin and myself both sit as members that represent the public's interest. So I would definitely think that the committee would benefit from seeing previous plans. However, I would like I think it's important to have a fresh eye on it going forward, but would open it up for discussion.
Having never seen the previous documents that you're referring to, I think absolutely we need to look at those. And then maybe what Swenson Hagen can do is tell us what would work and what wouldn't, and maybe give us their analysis of those plans, so that we're not reinventing the wheel third or fourth time, it sounds like.
How many of us at this table were part of, you say this is new, it isn't a formal setting page.
Yeah.
But along the years, we've come with these, worked with commissioners and developed those plans. So for extension, except we've never seen them either, okay, so maybe it was, and I don't know if they've ever, okay. So I mean, like, there was along the way different groups that did consult.
Or I am aware of.
And I
this
mean,
through my
I
personal
no
life, yeah.
disrespect, but I mean, like, we're not starting at ground, maybe we are starting at ground zero and we should let the past be in the past, but real good things exist.
And they were all part of those documents
Yeah.
that we would look at.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of this, you know, tends to roll around a revolving door. So in the past, at one point, when this was attempted in the last some years, there was almost getting up to a plating phase. And so at that particular time, that plating sequence had dedicated right away. Now, things kind of got to a point where the city came up with their water and sewer policies, and so there was meter fees and things like that. So that's where that mechanism stopped. But then that mechanism would have had, in reality, public streets and all of that. So does that mean now you've got a street that looks like something in front of your house? Or is your setting going back to, like, I want this to be more like a campus feel where we're having maybe not public streets with curb and gutter and storm sewer and design standards like that, but we utilize ditches and roads, and it's more of a country type campus feel. And that can set with different standards, right? So that particular time, you would have had individual lots. And that means there's setbacks on everything, and you come in with a different type of setting, and some of those master plans have that type of feel. But it's just getting it now from that time to reality today with today's policies and standards. And that's what all of the things that we would be looking at. But I do agree, there's there's parts of good information and all of those things.
Two things before I take Wayne's over here. One, I want to correct the record. Dustin, Wayne, Martinez, and myself are all free members of representing the public. And then I've got a question, but Wayne, I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, way back when we started the grounds out there, Swenson and Hagan was the key engineer to help get this thing going, get the planning of the development stuff gathered up and everything. We're not duplicating a lot of that or just refreshing it. We had a thick master plan book. I don't know if any of those are left anymore.
Well, there's the original
There
one,
you go. There it is. Yeah.
but there's been two since then.
Right.
Yes, I
Yeah,
don't think we've
I
got.
haven't got the latest,
I've seen one of those.
That's the original one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
but there's a lot of interesting groups I wanted to be involved with that back then. I don't know if those groups are even around anymore.
Yeah,
Should be followed up maybe.
So,
right.
Jason, can I interrupt just a little bit?
Yep, and then we do have a comment or question from Steve back here.
So I kind of want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There is when I met with the city a year ago, they were really confused as to what was actually platted out here. And so my conversations with Swenson and Hagan at this point, it's not designing, it's not creating a master plan, it's looking at this lot, trying to decide what's right and what's wrong, because the city has multiple plats that are kind of recorded, but not really recorded, and so that's kind of where we're started with Swenson and Hagan to at least look at this, make sure we knew where our utilities were, make sure we knew, there's roads on here that we can't do because they're in wetlands. So, so I'm really trying to find out what the usable space is for this group, and for others to try to figure out what we can do. I've seen, a plan where they actually had buildings underneath the power line. Well, we can't do that. And Steve had forwarded one of the plans to us. We've got one from Preferred. We've got some different ideas that have been out there recently. And so for me as a commissioner, my goal at this point is to find out what the cost is going to be to hire someone to go through this process to help this group so that I can get that in the budget. No decisions are being made, no layouts are being done. This group has a lot of work to do before we get to that part.
So, I mean, is the first step then, Wayne, is for you to work with Swenson Hagan or whoever in the city of Bismarck and decide what plots were properly. So like if we wanted to rezone or wanted to do something, where are we even starting at?
Right.
That's a problem right now. We don't even know.
And that's where we need Swenson and Hagan to get to that ground zero.
Yeah.
So that we have a starting point of what truly, because like I said, when I met with the city, they had two of them and they weren't sure which one was really in play.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Even to the point on this one, they've got an access out to Highway 10. Well, the DOT isn't gonna allow that. Because it's too close to the West Drive already.
But if it was recorded, is it a grandfathered in? That's what you need to figure out.
It's recorded, and that's again why I asked
Is it
Swenson and
that
Hagan
DOT?
to find out
Yeah.
that part. So Swenson and Hagan, they're here on the very, very early part to kind of give us, this is the process that we need to go through. But for me personally, as a commissioner, is what's it cost? So that we can decide how it can be done entering into budget cycle for Early County Commission. If we're talking $100,000, that might take some. Or we have to figure out how to get that money. If it's 20, 30, 40, okay, that's a different story. Now, we have something that we can work with. From there, once we know where Swenson and Hagan is at, then we'll ask them to come in and meet with everybody, go through the old plans, try to plan this out, like the motocross. Do you need more room? Is there something else that needs to be done? Circle track, same thing, 4-H extension, what do we need for growth? And that's kind of where the next step is once we find out costs.
I had a question.
Steve,
Sorry.
you're good, Steve?
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
Okay.
So we were talking about changing this from a PUD to a P.
Correct.
So does that change your setback requirements and going from a lot structure to? Explain that.
Yeah, so when you have a plat that's broken up by a series of lots, there's gonna be a setback on every single lot.
Right.
Right, so if we were to go in and, for an instance, plat this as one lot with series of easements for access and utilities, those types of things tend to go away, except for the exterior boundary of the plat, right? So you get now some efficiencies and things where now we're just talking about fire separation between buildings and things like that, right? So there are some good reasons to do that, where you get away from that lot structure. Now, you can come in and you can also have things where there can be a development agreement that, or a PUD type agreement that says, you know, here's the conditions that the city will say, well, here's the conditions we want. Okay, well, let's negotiate these things. And then we could have a PUD agreement that would be able to make it work for everybody, right? And so those are all the things that you would want to have explored to come to that decision on how to plat it, what zoning you need, are there any agreements that go along with that? And then you can now take that, because at one time, when these lots were all done and this plat was gonna be submitted, at one time it was gonna be so that there could be some property that could be sold, right? And so that was a purposeful thing for that. And if that's not gonna happen, then there's some reasons not to do that.
It was in my meetings with the city, they actually urged us to go to the public zoning rather than the PUD. And again, I don't know what the past, commissioners, if they truly wanted to sell off lots or how they wanted to do it. My vision's different. My visions is using this for public purposes, for all of our groups here and more. So I'm not excited about a PUD where we have lots to sell. That's just not my vision. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are and what we then recommend to Burley County Commission. That's a whole nother subject.
And item number 5, by the way,
Oh,
there's
it's,
discussion about
Yeah.
that, so,
sorry.
no, you're good. I think it's important to ask a question while we have representatives here.
So when you guys met with the city and looked at what's been filed, what hasn't, we were told at our last meeting that's PUD already, is that correct? Or did they just?
It is currently a PUD, yes.
Okay, so that's probably what stamped. Okay, I just want to make sure.
But even with PUD, they still weren't sure which drawing to use.
Which drawing in an agreement, because like the one that like Bus Stop is allowed to bring in old homes that maybe don't meet code. Like there's some exceptions in that PUD that of how it was written back in the
Right.
day. So I mean, okay,
So you've got, ordinance updates over the years with the municipalities, right? And so to come in, get something down where you like, this is our plat, this is what we're working off for kind of our infrastructure, our layout. Here's the conditions that we have, to have that all kind of updated and to have it all brought together in one entity now with that sequence of zoning and platting, it is important because there's right now questions on, well, what do we use and what's important and what's not?
you wouldn't want to change it to public, like do the process of walking it through, zoning it public to get rid of all the lots and all of that without having a plan of, like, they would go hand in hand, or would you recommend doing one first so it makes the job easier?
So what we would always try to do, and this is even if you came in and had a set of 80 acres or something, said, I want to develop it, say, okay, let's sit down and get your dream. And we're going to put a concept together of what that can be. Now, it gets to be very important when you have a plat that does not have any lots or right of ways, because on there, the city would, and everybody would want to see where's our easements going to be for utilities, where will the easements be for access, right? And so we're setting some things together and kind of laying out that infrastructure before we ever develop a plan set, but then you're starting to put spaces together, right?
So you don't need the P.
The zoning
The
entity,
zoning before the other part.
the zoning entity would come in with the plat.
They'd be together. Okay.
Ready to go.
Would be the vision. Okay.
So in discussing this switch from PUD to P, I'm wondering, and having no idea about the background here, I'm wondering if maybe at one time there was an idea that the user groups would be able to get ground leases and build their own projects.
That's kind of what my take on it was too.
And so maybe it wasn't necessarily about selling the land, but partially, making condominiums out of land, basically. And so that the county doesn't have to pay for everything. Does going through the P make that more difficult or just different?
It's just different. What we would do is we would pull all of the, if there was a PUD ordinance that was attached to a particular plat that's out there, we would pull all that data together. And then we would go through there. And so one of the steps would be sitting down with the city also and saying, okay, here, we had 3 ordinance PUDs that were out here for zoning and for use. So what type of things are you guys landing on if we came into plat? And then we would start walking through that sequence.
I, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the biggest thing that comes out of a P or a PUD is with a PUD, you have setback issues for every lot, where a P is just.
Use efficient use of.
Yeah.
Yeah, a PUD is a plan unit development, so you're asking for things that just may be different from ordinance. It doesn't supplant or supersede the ordinance, it just is something where you can maybe change a setback or, maybe there's a topography thing that's, and we're asking for rear yard setback to be different or something, right?
So a summary statement and then a question. As I understand from the information you presented today, is that we are not even to phase 1.
No.
That we are in very introductory conversations. Phase 1 would then be moving forward with talking with the groups that sit around the table and or the public if that's deemed necessary and in what order. Phase 2 is the development of the plat. That is when the discussions about the zoning or the decisions about the zoning and the plat would come into play. And then phase 3 would actually executing that planning for infrastructure and site development. So like,
Construction and
we're on Monday of January
Right.
1 and we're not even talking about December 31st.
yeah, you, at this time, you do not have an agreement with me. This is an update to give you an idea of how we're presenting a proposal to Commissioner Munson so that he can put that within his budget. And it's set up to be phased so that you don't have to enter into a contract with us at any particular, overall thing. You just say, well, right now, we're gonna budget for phase 1. We have that money and you wanna do that, then you could go ahead and do that. And then at such time as you deem it to move forward to get into plating and the stormwater and infrastructure, those things can be brought in the other phases in separate contracts.
So my follow-up question to this, and I don't know if it can even be answered at this point. I'll say it as a question because I want to say it as a statement, but I'll say this question. Ultimately, what is the role of this group in the decision-making process to plat and or rezone? And I'll say it as a statement. Are we, is this committee, what permissions do we have with, and I'm kind of almost looking more at the commissioner. What decision-making process or permissions do we have as this entity on a future plat?
Well, the way we've set this group up and as we've all, you are an advisory group for the county commission. So we need you guys to look at this, create this plan of what we want to build, what we're dreaming of, and then present that to Burley County Commission for their approval. Because everything that this group does has to go to either Burley County Commission or Parks and Rec, depending on which direction it goes for their approvals.
That was my assumption and
Yep.
statement that I tried to get you to say, and so I wasn't, I didn't say it wrong, but that was my understanding per what we agreed 2 meetings ago on that chain,
Yep.
basically chain of command.
Achievement. And this is just all data collecting at this point, my point for meeting with Swenson Hagen is to figure out cost. And have an idea of what we're looking at down the road so that we can budget for that. Then back to this group and start looking at the last plan or the plan before that and what can be used. And Burley County, hired Swenson and Hagen a few years ago to go out and start some of this work, and then they stopped. So we've got the benefit of Burley County having already spent some money out there, so we have that data that was collected at that time.
Along with previous
Previous
plans.
plans, master plans, and so this group is gonna take all of that information and mull it together and then come out with recommendations that we can go back to the county and Swenson and Hagen and say, okay, we like this, we like this, we like this, you know. Steve put together a really neat blueprint of this as well,
Yeah, yeah.
with trails and all kinds of things, and so that Swenson and Hagen has that for their thought process. The plan that Prefer created, I sent that to them, so they have all of the previous work, and they've had the work that this group has done. Building sizes for the equestrian center, you're looking at that, but then again, once we get moving forward on the planning, like I said, we need to talk to the motocross. Do we need any more room? What's the next piece, or what's the plan for that? What's the next plan for extension? Where do we want to grow? How we want to grow? If those items all then come from this group to put in a plan to go back to Swenson and Hagen once they've been hired to move forward.
Excellent. Steve? That's you.
Well, I think if I may, Madam Chair, but the perspective on the 2017 plan is, and it's online, you can pull it up and you can look at it 15 times. And there's two other plans that go all the way back to like 2002. In my recollection, the 2017 plan was never adopted by the Town Commission as the plan. So what we are working with is what is on paper right now, the PUD that goes back to the last change according to January of 2013, I think. And there was some things happened in that plan in there that was protectionism, you know, for people didn't want something up there. So well, we got some basic materials and stuff, but when we look at this group here, this is a group now that lives out there, works out there, plays out there, that is going to be developing the plan, the concept based on the needs and uses that are related there now. There are a lot of other interests, yes, there are. But even with that, even if we'd had the 17 plan approved and we'd be working, or somebody would be working with the 17 plan that's on right now, you'd still have to go through the plotting and zoning process, you know, to move it forward. And most people know where I stand, and the public is the best way to go, the most flexibility and the ease of development out there at this complex system. So it's taking a lot that's happened, a lot of the interest, and I think the groups that are out there now, the motocross and 4-H as the programming entity and extension and Buckstop Junction, you know, that's the place we start to move it on from there. And how do we make it more flexible and easier to do?
So I have a question for you, Wayne.
Yep.
So you guys keep talking about running it through, this will be numbers, budget numbers. If you run it through the county budget, like in 2023, is there extra money to have them start? I guess that's my question. Like,
Right.
how can you get them to start now? Because if not, we're gonna be sitting here in January, August, or January, my gosh. July, we have another meeting in June, we have a meeting in July, a meeting in August, a meeting in September. If you can't expend, if you have to budget it for 20, whatever you guys are doing now,
Right.
and you can't expend any money till December, we're coming here and meeting a bunch. I mean, maybe we're collecting data, but we have to collect the right data. So it's a waste of time.
The hard part with that, Marie, is I don't know how much.
Okay,
Do I have some money? Yes.
okay, but
He
you're gonna
hasn't
get
given me that
that.
number, so I
You're
don't know.
gonna get that, because
Right.
the other thing I would suggest is, if it's not a huge amount, is we go outside of that budget and we use the actual Missouri Valley Complex fund. If it's 20, if it's 30, that's what it's for, and you don't need to wait to, you know what I mean? Like, if that's really what this is for, that's the starting point.
Right.
That's why that money was kept. If it's 100,000, it may be different, but if you can't do it this summer or this fall and get us going, then I think we should have a conversation of asking the county, you asking the county commission to release funds so we can get.
To the planning stage. And
What's
you
the
and I
number
are on the
that's
same
spent?
page. In my belief, very similar to yours, that savings account that's there is for the development of the complex. There's some strong opposition with some commissioners, because they always want to keep it as a savings account. But that doesn't help us grow. It doesn't help us get to where we want to go. And so, yes, I mean, and so right now, I need budget numbers, so that I can put it in my budget to see if the county commission is going to reject it. And if they do, without a doubt, I will go to the complex reserve. But if I can budget it a little bitty, you know, some this year, some next year, so it's not a large dollar amount. But again, I don't even know what we're talking about.
Sure.
Because I've never hired Swenson Hagen before.
It's this, lots of groups. And what happens, this is my opinion of what happens, is they make some progress. We get different county commissioners. And I mean, no offense,
No.
because you're new, a lot of our commissioners are new. They create an issue, or they create stoppage and whatever. And that group falls apart. And they never make it. And I'll be honest, I hear that from different people, maybe because I'm coming from an entity that's been part of a lot of groups, is there's concern about this is all just whatever, and it's gonna fizzle out quickly.
That's why we have this group
Right.
formally created, and that's why I did it that way first. Because you represent the citizens of Burley County. As a county commissioner, I need to listen to the citizens of Burley County. Other commissioners will do the same, and we'll have that conversation at the table, but I need you folks to be very vigilant in what you need, so that I have that voice behind me when I go to Burley County Commission. And we've never had this. We had a fair board, I don't know how many years ago, but through the last couple of master plans, we've not had this group. And I really am counting on this group to be that voice that's heard. I can be loud, but it's better to have you behind me.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't wanna see us sitting around till January until you have
Right.
funding to pay them, cause I think like the phase one, whether you're paying it needs to happen. If not, it's just us sitting around here with ideas and
Right.
going back to the commission and.
The same point, yes, I need to be able to hire him, but I also need, I agree with you, Marie, we gotta look through the last couple plans and see what was beneficial, what can be used. But then we also need to make sure, and that's one of the reasons I suggested we all talk about what we do and where we're at and what we need. Because I honestly think the next meeting we do upstairs at the conference room table and we lay out blueprints. And we start marking, this is where we think this would go, this is where we think this would go, what this would be beneficial here. So that we all agree then too. So that when we can hire Swenson and Hagen, we've got another step forward.
Not that I would intend to hold you to it, but could we
Oh, yeah,
get,
you will.
I know. But could we realistically say that we would have a general idea of the amount that we would be looking at for a contract in the next X number of meetings?
Well, Jason has said he's gonna have a proposal to me this week,
Okay.
so that we know dollars.
Yeah.
That I can plug into my budget, because I have my budget done by Friday.
Okay.
So if it's phase one, phase two, phase three, and if I can do phase one this year, absolutely, we pull the trigger. If it's phase two for next year, that's what goes in the budget. But I need to lay that out so that
Yeah, I just.
last year through our budgeting process, we all cut a lot of places. And I can tell you my ramps, my parks, all went almost in half. My Missouri Valley Complex went, a lot of it came out. So we are tight this year, but there is still a little bit of money left. Because we've decided to not do projects. This is a project that we need to move forward. But that's also why we're budgeting for next year to have that.
I just definitely don't want to inhibit future planning and discussions over a what if situation.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't want for us to pigeonhole ourselves before we have even an idea of what we're
Yeah.
looking at.
Right.
So, go ahead, Bob.
I think from a practical standpoint, if there's concern about the full commission's willingness to go along, the less asks of them, the better.
Mhm.
So that would be an argument in favor of using complex fund as much as possible, avoid using general fund because you know, if you're asking them for money, you're giving them some control as well. And so if this committee can work within the fund that is allocated to the complex rather than going to the general fund, that's going to create more autonomy and control until it gets to the point of being approved by the full commission.
Yeah. You know, the conversations that have happened over the last year since I've been working on this, honestly, I've had more pushback on using the reserve fund than anything else. And I don't understand that because it should be for the development of this facility. So it has to be carefully, the conversation has to be carefully had with the right data and the right wishes of it.
With your blessing and that of the committee, I feel that it would be probably beneficial to the conversation to bump item number 5 up, discussion on the PUD and the P zoning.
Sure.
And then we can close up with your budget update.
Mhm.
You know, we're kind of already halfway down that road.
Through most of the budget.
So unless there's any objection, I'm going to make a change to the agenda one more time.
Said anything else for Winston Hagen? Other than,
I'm pretty comfortable that any questions about the P zoning and stuff would have already been asked. So if there is any other round table.
just thank you.
Yeah, thank.
Yeah, so I want to keep you guys, if you guys had other things
Oh,
going.
feel free to stick around.
Back on board again.
Thank you.
So I apologize, I missed the last meeting when the city was here and talked about P versus PUD. And so I would look towards you folks, what your thoughts are between those two and what direction make the most sense.
I think that's why I asked the question, can you turn it E before you do the plot? And you said it should go kind of hand in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it just makes sense that you would switch it to public to make everything easier. That's the assumption. That's how we're gonna bring it to the city. I mean, I don't know. Get rid of all the rules and stuff that we had on the old PUDs.
Yeah, and having the city conversation is very important, and that would be along with all the groups and getting all the needs and spatialness and everything. Going back and having those meetings with the city is very important, because then we take all that data and we're able to sit down and say, okay, here's how we're looking at this. You know, bringing in the zoning conversation is part of that planning sequence for the mechanism, but getting it worked out before you go to that is very important. So it'd be part of the whole first phase of conversation. Because then you get to hear what all sides are gonna come back with as far as parameters and where the lines drawn in sand and all that. Then you can make decisions based on having some comments, right? And that's the input and the information you guys need to know where you guys want to land as a complex, right?
I agree with Marie on, to me, it's a no-brainer to move to P, but I would definitely encourage and entertain more discussion around the table to the contrary or in support
I got a question and probably already been answered, but so it's PUD now.
Correct.
And let's say that at Buckstop Junction, there is a stipulation that they can bring in a building that doesn't meet code right now. But if we would switch to P and that would go away, would that go away too, or all of a sudden they have to follow?
I would assume we could write that in the new.
Yeah, and that's where these agreements come into, you know, so whether, irregardless, let's just throw the zoning part of it out, but there's things that are going to be talked about. You have buildings that may not be habitable, right? From a building code perspective, but you got them there because they're historical. There's things that are gonna be written into, most likely, an agreement. And those are the things that we want to have fleshed out going through this first part of this process, so that when you actually get to a point where you say, okay, we're gonna pull the trigger and we're gonna plat. Now you know what the conditions are going into that platting sequence and know what the conditions will be for your zoning. And you're gonna know really what that agreement might look like. Because you don't wanna do it, you know, before you guys all have your input in. You wanna do it in the process, not after. So that's why this first part's important, because it's laying a lot of groundwork and you've got a lot of different users in here. And the city may not know how all the users are looking at use of the property and how they need to operate and how they're looking at things, right? So that's why that first part of it is trying to get everybody on the same page.
A question, Jason, and I think to the group is that by going through the new zoning and plating process and what's current with building codes and everything, I'm gonna say it's also gonna protect all of your groups, long-term liability wise in development and managing your own areas. Because it gives you a framework to operate with, and the next group that comes in to be on Buckstop Junctions board or whomever is gonna have a set of guidelines to operate with and manage it. And from a liability and operation standpoint, it's the safest way to go.
Yep. It's like if we went in and you had a lot in town and you would say, well, boy, I want to put this use in here. And I go, well, I'm sorry, you can't put a coffee shop in here because it's a special use. Well, okay, what's that take? Well, we're gonna go talk to the city about it. Well, it sits right next to residential. Dude, they're not gonna like that either, right? So you need a buffer here. It's like that. We're gonna go in, get all this stuff worked out so that we have a framework of everyone's uses, how they operate, how it relates to the plat, how the complex operates, and how that relates back to the city. You know, the city is gonna provide some utility, right? So, services, not construction costs, but they'll provide water, they'll provide the ability to connect into sewer. You know, some of those things are gonna come into play too. So it's trying to take everything, which you really haven't had up to this point, if you go forward with this, and taking your master plan conceptual, your higher thoughts and what you want to develop this into, and actually augmenting it into your sequence of platting and development, and now we're gonna push this forward. The last time we were involved, that process was not in play. We were hired to go through a nuts and bolts process, which would have been the boundary survey, the topo, the platting, stormwater plan, and basically to produce a plat that had a series of lots in it, and it had the ability to have lots that could be sold. And that was our direction at that time. We weren't asked, and there was no offering for anyone else for input. It was, do this. This is the wishes of the commission, and that's how we're gonna roll. And it stopped at a point where we got into conversations about meter fees and different things like that. So this will go one step backwards for things that are taking all of the data and putting it together thoughtfully and saying, okay, where should a road be? What size of use do you need, right? And putting those things together to thoughtfully say, this is where your use, here's the roads. Do we have concepts like, hey, you're here on the weekends and we're here on some weekends, but we've got shared parking lots and things like that. So all of those things are gonna be looked at. You know, not everybody needs to have a parking lot possibly. If we've got a campus, then we can talk to the city and talk through those things and say, you know, here's a 400 stall parking lot for these 5 uses. And at any point in the year, someone's gonna be using them. And it opens up also other opportunities for additional uses for people that we may not have thought about, that may come in and say, you guys got this awesome complex now. Do we have an opportunity to come here to utilize this, rent this for the weekend or something? That's that process.
There is any other discussion, input, questions?
One more with that. So when I first sat down with the city and we started this conversation a year ago, they were the ones that encouraged us to look at public because it would be better for us to, work together. Like Jason said, I mean, if each entity is required to have X amount of parking stalls, but if you're a public, you can share. So there's so much more use that we can get out of this facility with that process. Whether it's permitting, all of the other items that come along with public, make it a lot easier for them and for us. And so the city was the one that was very encouraging on, having us look at the public side of it.
Coverage, overarching groups of protection and support.
Yep.
I didn't go into item number 5 anticipating that we would do a motion and a vote. I'd certainly entertain one from the committee if we feel that we're there to move forward on strong consideration of P for zoning. P. P.
I think if the committee did take a position on P or PUD, it's gonna help Swenson Hagen determining what direction to go in developing a site plan.
Yeah.
Would your motion be, does it need to have the word recommendation, or how do we, so this, would we use the word recommendation? Okay. I move that we recommend to the Burley County Commission that we change the zoning for the Missouri Valley Complex to public.
We have the motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Alan? Any discussion on the motion to recommend the commission to consider P zoning for the Missouri Valley Complex? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Our recommendation will be for the commission to consider moving to P for zoning. Commissioner, would you like to just hang out?
I'll just hang out.
And give us your update on budget and others.
Well, and so here's, for budget wise, we went through the complex and scheduled our normal expenses. Now, what I'm gonna ask from Swenson Hagen is to get a budget of what it's gonna take for us to get to that P zone and create the plat and all of that. Once I know that, I will know how much to either augment this budget, or as Marie suggested, go back to Hurley County Commission. And that may be a wish of this board, instead of putting it in the budget, that we present it to the commission to spend it out of reserves. Right, so that's why we're here for this conversation, because Marie brings up a good point, is this tax dollars from property tax, or is it used money out of reserves, where that reserve money is meant to be for the development of the facility? And so I would look towards you, I don't know the dollars yet, but even if you wanted to make a motion one way or the other, then I would know what direction to go with it as well.
Alan?
I have a question, Wayne. So the reserves, that's not taxpayer dollars in that reserve. That was money in that it was put in there from the sale of land, right?
And interest, but not.
Some of it was in there from the sale of the land to the jail. So it does come from public dollars. Actually, it's coming from the sales tax that we're collecting towards the construction. So it's not property tax dollars, but it is sales tax dollars from the sale that we're getting from the sale of that land.
In the beginning, it was the Fair Association's money.
And there was some in there to
It's
start
not
with,
a lot,
right?
and that technically, I think, was
Was.
built on our property taxes back when we had a Fair Association.
Yeah.
So I mean, but that's a long ways
Right.
back. And then
Right.
since then, it's just been as we've sold the land to our schools.
Right. We sold the land to ourselves.
No, that wasn't ours. So I was gonna say, but yeah,
I have another question for you. So what about the interest made on it?
That goes into the account.
Did we,
I did spend some of that interest this year, right? Just so you know.
that's what I'm wondering. Is there a way to use some of the interest money on that to do this rather than tap into the into the reserves?
If that is a recommendation from this board, that's what I will take to the commission. We did use some of the money for the stone and gravel issues we had late last winter.
Right.
Puts me in the same line of thinking that,
Then you're not tapping into the reserves, you're using the interest off of that reserves to do this and.
And we could ask Auditor Swanskowski to give us a counting of how much we have there. Not today. later.
update on that, not too long ago too, so I know that.
The interest is going back to that fund. It doesn't go to the general fund.
That's something I'd have to verify.
Well, we took money
Mhm.
from interest earned. That we took money from 3 different accounts
Yeah.
to pay for that bill.
So my current understanding of it is that fund is a general account fund.
Yeah.
Is part of the general account, or general fund, I should say. And so all the interest earnings of that goes to the general fund because it is part of the general fund. However, those specific monies are invested and we can track how much we have received in investments from that particular portion of the general fund. So it is part of the general fund, but it's kind of it's the same pair of pants, it's just a different pocket.
But you guys can track it through your computer software to say to someone, hey, it really is, we're taking $5,000, but you can say this is why it literally was the interest for.
We can track how much interest those particular funds have earned.
I
Could you?
specifically remember the
Yeah.
commission meeting that we targeted that
Yep.
interest money on the sewer.
So could you provide this, but on the fund? Like data on the fund, like financials on the fund, like where the balance sits, how much interest it earned in the last year? I don't know. what-
We should be able to track that down,
Something like that.
exactly how much money is in the fund, how much interest it has earned over the last couple of years. Now granted, that interest would have gone directly back into the general fund. However, as far as how much it has earned, we should be able to find that information.
And then how much you guys pulled for snow, right? Or was it gravel, whatever?
Yep.
Both,
Both, I think it was,
yeah, to save.
was that gravel or was it snow that we pulled out? It was gravel.
It was to mitigate the issue that we had with too much clay in our gravel. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We had a statement or question.
Yeah, I got a question for you. When the county sold that land west of Yeagan Road, where general equipment is and all those other places, how much did that bring in per acre?
Offhand, I do not know the exact amount.
Is that part of this budget? What's in there?
I believe it is. However, what that exact amount is, I do not know offhand. All the proceeds of the funding for the detention center is in there, and I believe that was $6 million.
Yeah.
Which
That
some of
used to
it's
be
been
part of the
siphoned off
fairgrounds
since.
property out there.
Did we find that out, Mark?
What that amount was?
Yeah,
Yeah, I should be able to track that.
yeah, and where it went.
So as we look at the funding of going forward with, potentially going forward with Swenson and Hagan, what I'm understanding is it would alleviate some stress on Commissioner Munson, especially with your portfolio, if we made a recommendation on where that funding would come from. With that, should the committee entertain that, make the motion, et cetera, is there a walk back on that if and when we would get the proposal and we go, no, maybe, now that we know the number, I mean, are we beholden to that kind of a recommendation?
Jason, ballpark. Number for your proposal, step 1, step 2, step 3.
Can I just wait till the June 25th meeting?
We can.
That would kind of be my next
Make a
time.
motion, because that'd be weird.
Yeah.
I don't think we're talking, I mean, do you want a formal motion to table this until June?
I don't think we even need, as far
I
as
just, think
that.
I would love to see the Missouri Valley Fair Fund stuff laid out.
Sure.
Before we decide.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our portfolio holder if we were to table this to, or move this.
The drawback for me is my budget's due on
Right.
Friday. And so if it doesn't go in here, then that's our only option is the interest earned. And that might not be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because then it's not, again, like we talked, it's not taxpayer dollars. It's the fund dollars that are paying for it, or the fund interest actually at this point paying for it. But if you made the recommendation that we should follow that, or even table it until the next meeting, so we had all the data. We just won't have it in our budget this year. And I'm okay with that.
You could put it in your budget and cut it at the end.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I can go down, I
You
can't
can't
go
go
up,
up.
so
I was gonna
I
say,
can
you
put it
can do
in.
whatever you need to do, and we just sit here and do. Well,
Yeah.
and then at the end, you come at that last budget meeting, you get to
Yep.
strike it out. I don't know.
I'm fine with that.
That sounds like I like a backup plan.
Yeah.
So at that point, you don't need any action.
We don't need action at this point, but you might want to table it for next.
Right, I would encourage that it'd be another agenda item for June 25th meeting. Okay, is there any additional discussion or topics that we need to consider for today's meeting? Oh, yeah, where are we gonna get it? Do we need a ballpark? You need a ballpark for your budget.
Right, and we'll get that
Okay.
in the next day or two, and
Okay.
I'll have it available for mine.
Just one last thing, Kate, who is going to speak at the June 25th? We should get that written so it's on the agenda and that group knows.
I believe
What?
Who's
the,
gonna speak, the user group? We need to put a user group on our June 25th.
Megan, question.
Ag question.
When was, okay, Megan Christensen, okay.
I think that's the final one.
Yeah. good luck.
The rodeo people.
No,
We still don't have a member representative from them.
What about the circle track? They're not a real user group, right?
that's in development.
That's in development.
You know, they were invited,
To speak,
to at least be part of the group.
could someone, I'd be interested in having them to see if they could come at noon? Maybe they want to tell us a vision?
Scott. Scott.
Scott?
Scott Olson.
Yeah, this says it, he was in there, June. Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be tons of people, it's more than it's like. No. Oh, yeah.
You know, there's a group out there too that is hoping to be able to use that circle track for horse relay races.
They should come and
Right.
invite them. You know that?
I
Huge
think
fan.
that's part of
the ag.
taking a question.
That's part of the, because I know, Commissioner Bach and, now works out at UTDC, and so there's been a lot of conversations with him about being able to use that track for, horse relay races. So,
That'll be on your thing.
That's on.
okay.
You can see yours, you might.
Couple
cover a
weeks, I'll
lot.
tell you about that.
I don't want to wait.
Any additional discussion for any business? Not, our next meeting, Tuesday, June 25th at 12 noon here in this room unless I hear otherwise. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second,
Second.
all right. Anticipating unanimous vote to adjourn the meeting. We shall stand in adjournment.